You're listening to the Orchestra Teacher Podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Orchestra Teacher Podcast. This is Dr. Charles Laux, and we have a kind of a unique episode today. This is our episode number 119, and this episode is literally all about the bass. And I have with me a wonderful guest. His name is Darren Sacks, and he is a double bass teacher in the Boston area. He runs a service that helps bass players with their high school bass players with their auditions into conservatories. He's had a really great amount of luck doing this. And so I want to welcome and introduce everybody to Mr. Darren Sacks. Darren, thanks so much for being here on the Orchestra Teacher Podcast.
It's my pleasure being here, Dr. Laux.
Yes. So you kind of reached out to me, and I was like, wow, this is a really cool thing. And so I was looking at your website and all the things that you've been doing, and it's really an awesome service. So just tell us a little bit about, I always kind of start with the background, where you were brought up, your training, and then we'll get into like all the things that you're doing now and the services that you offer.
Well, originally from New York, but like many families, we ended up moving out to Connecticut, where I had the majority of my schooling. And in high school, my orchestra, or actually I should say my combined band and orchestra, went to Boston to go see the Boston Symphony for a field trip. And that's when the interest in double bass clinched, because before that I was actually a saxophone player.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a quite a unique switch.
Yeah, it's certainly a big switch, right? But so that field trip clinched it for me. And I ended up switching to double bass at that point. I was really passionate about starting bass, and actually, I was really drawn to one particular member of the orchestra. His name is Jim Orleans, and Jim is now, he's retired from the Boston Symphony at this point. But actually, about a year later after starting bass, I went up to Boston to go visit him. I emailed him. And my mom drove me up to Boston, and I had a sample lesson with him when I was checking out New England Conservatory. And after our lesson, he invited me to the Starbucks across the street, and we continued to have a conversation.
Amazing.
And from there, he told me about how he started bass in his 20s after being a composition major. And so he didn't even graduate from Indiana University with that bachelor's degree. He dropped out, went into the workforce, and then returned to double bass at age 27 and completed his bachelor's degree in music and double bass performance.
Wow.
And so 27, 2 years at Boston Conservatory, a fellowship at Tanglewood, and then made the BSO within 1 or 2 years after that.
It's just amazing when people can do that, and so many of us started when we were young. I mean, I started when I was 9, but I kind of didn't really take it seriously till I was in high school. And then, but it's amazing that some people can do that. And that's a true story of, I guess, a lot of hard work and talent and everything all mixed together.
But even more so, the thing that was so impressive about this is just how fast he did this.
Right.
How is it possible for a person to do that and accomplish so much in so little time? I mean, people spend their entire lives preparing for the Boston Symphony. Yeah. And sometimes, it doesn't always work out for them, right?
Right. So for a lot of people.
Right. So it got me thinking. And so, through many back and forth emails with Jim, we've kept in touch over the years. Occasionally I'd go to him, in between my studies at Boston Conservatory. My primary teacher was Larry Wolf, but I would still see Jim from time to time and would reconnect with him. And, through those conversations, I got to know a lot about his mindset.
Yeah.
And just how it wasn't I realized that it's not just a motivational thing. It's about planning goals, setting, being organized about practice.
Mm-hmm.
So that the idea of how to get efficient at practice became a obsession almost to me.
Yeah. Well, now now it sounds like you're passing that along to your students.
That's what I try to do, and I feel like I've had some recent success with that, and that's what has led to everything that I'm doing now at the moment.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget that, mindset and it like that. It's just mind over matter, but just being intentional with your practice and what you do daily and how you go about yourself and your habits. That makes a huge difference. More than talent, it's the work ethic and putting those things, that kind of effort in. The Orchestra Teacher Podcast is sponsored by Kaleidoscope Adventures. Recruiting and retaining talented musicians is essential for new orchestra directors building a program. And one of my favorite tips for generating interest is to plan a trip. There are so many options. You can participate in a festival at an amusement park, take the stage at Carnegie Hall in New York City, or travel abroad and perform in Vienna, the legendary city of music. Wherever you end up, not only will your current students look forward to the trip, but younger students will count the days until it's their turn to go. If you have no idea where to start, connect with Kaleidoscope Adventures by visiting the link in the show notes. They've been planning exceptional performance travel since 1993 and will make you look like a seasoned professional.
Yes, because oftentimes I'll have students, like some students have quite a bit of talent when they come in. But during the first lesson, something that I frequently see, at least on the initial lesson, is that they become a little bit uncomfortable with the initial critique, because for the longest time, they've been rocking it out in the high school orchestra.
Yeah, like they're the best.
All of a sudden,
right.
You're eyeballing Interlochen, Boston Youth Symphony, Tanglewood, All-States, and that's a whole different game. That's just a whole different level.
Yeah.
So it's about how do I inform students about what that standard is, what is the competition look like for that, and how to also not just look at the result only, to not just only look at the result, but to also look at what is the process to getting there.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm trying to not just develop all-state bound students.
Yeah.
Or tangle with, but the byproduct of what I'm teaching them is they oftentimes are winning these auditions.
Yeah.
But the real things that I feel like I'm teaching them is learning how to become how to learn. Yeah. Basically, like, how do you learn? How do you start a task that seems almost out of reach at first? Right. So what I do is, after that initial critique, and yes, sometimes it gets a little bit overwhelming for them at that first initial meeting with
right.
them.
Well, and I was going to say, like, I've been teaching, this is my 30th year teaching, and so I've seen kind of a change in students' willingness to be able to accept some pretty harsh criticism. And when I was growing up, it was like it was pretty tough. And I don't know if it's that way anymore, but I think it's harder for students. Like, I have a lot of students who will like, well, if I can't do it perfectly the first time or second time, I'm not going to do it. And I think the reality, what you're talking about is great as all the accolades that they maybe already had when they come to you and you're like, here it is. Here's the real deal, right? Here are the answers, and here's how you can make yourself even better. But sometimes it's difficult for kids to swallow.
I definitely agree with that. And oftentimes the content that a lot of students nowadays consume is shorter in length. And so I also adjusted my teaching style accordingly.
Yeah.
So sometimes if they're new to high level bass coaching, I start out with, okay, what is something that I know will be a quick win for them that will get their initial confidence going? So once they get confident that they're able to problem solve, that's like the initial thing. They have to get confident in their ability to problem solve first. Then after that, once they build that confidence, then we start to give them a little bit more quantity.
Yeah. Well, they have that autonomy is so important, you know?
Yes.
And that was when I was going through college, that's my teacher's whole goal was to teach me how to teach myself, because someday he wasn't going to be there. And I know that's most of our teacher's goal, but he really instilled that in me, and just understanding the processes that I needed to go through, you know?
Not to mention that many of the students that I teach, their parents are very focused on their kids' future and trajectory. They really want success. They want their kid to be successful. There are so many resources now for parents about, you know, how to approach college preparation, how to approach SATs, how to approach various whether it's exams or applications, college. There's I'm forgetting
the Common App or something.
Yeah, Common App. How to navigate that. There's resources, podcasts. There's books. There is just like this overwhelming amount of resources now that people, and there's a huge market for that.
Yeah.
And so
it's more competitive than ever.
Yes.
You know, I mean, 50% of the graduating class at my high school had a 4.0 or higher, which that did not exist when I was going through school. It was only the top of the top of the top, you know. And I tell my students, if I had the grades and the test scores today that I had back when I went to college, I wouldn't get into any of the 3 universities I already hold degrees from. I wouldn't be accepted. So it's a different world right now.
Most definitely. Yeah. And with that, what I think is that oftentimes when it comes to a student's potential, right? Oftentimes they come in, they're very smart, they're very intelligent, they often do well in other disciplines. Sometimes they're very natural at other disciplines. And all of a sudden, music becomes another avenue that which to succeed in. But it may be some high-level music study might be a little bit more challenging at first. That to me is not an issue about whether they have the talent or not. It's an issue of, do they know the system of which to obtain that success? Yeah. So I feel like my responsibility is to teach them a system that helps them to succeed. That way they have a proven path towards that success.
That's so great. Because kids need this. They really do. And, I feel like there's just a lot of expectation of regurgitation of information and less focus on, like you're talking about, the process of things. And I try to teach my students, how to practice, give them practice strategies. But this is just amazing, all the things that you're talking about.
Yes. And then the other thing is, one thing I noticed that maybe hasn't worked as well in the past. You're right. Like one mistake I think that I look back on is the idea that you can just make all your issues go away if you just simply practice more.
Right.
And I feel like that's very common advice that, maybe I used to apply or think about too much in my earlier days of learning the instrument. I mean, that was common advice. If you just practice more.
Yeah.
You'll get better at it. But if it's disorganized and if there's no system, if there's no organization, there's no system, there's no follow through on trying to complete more challenging aspects that help you grow, then sometimes the playing just stays stagnant no matter how many hours you put into it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to make it so that students have the most efficient pathway to success. It's not about the hours. like, how do you learn rhythm? What's a system you can apply right now that will help you to learn rhythm? What's a system you can apply right now that will help you become more confident with your shifting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that they need that. They need that guidance on the how, because the what is always there, but how do I do this? How do I approach that? And it's fantastic. Can you give us maybe an example of some things that you might coach someone on, particularly just for a general purpose for, teaching rhythm? What are maybe a few strategies or some things that you've come across that, because I feel like in rhythm a lot, there's kids that really get it very well. And then there's kids that just need to hear it and then they figure it out by rote. They're not really deciphering that and reading the rhythms.
First, students have to develop the sense of rhythm before they even apply it to the instrument. If they focus on applying it right away to the instrument sometimes, it becomes overwhelming because they're trying to navigate playing the instrument at the same time as learning something that may be somewhat foreign to them.
Yeah.
And so, and often it's not even, some students do have a sense of rhythm, but it just has to be refined further. Perhaps there are moments in high-level bass coaching where their tempo is consistent enough for some ensembles. Mm-hmm. But when you're being adjudicated for something like, again, BUTI Tanglewood or Interlochen, they're looking for an extra level of professionalism from a young person.
Right. Yeah.
So with that, I think that, again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that is a big thing that they should that they have to pay attention to is rhythm,
taking it away from the instrument first.
From the instrument, yes.
Yeah. Use clapping or use verbalization or both, or what are some of the things?
The other thing is, and I'm just remembering this, is that I also try to separate the left and right hands as well.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge believer in the metronome. And so it's even just learning how to use the metronome and what its purpose is. Because if they don't know what its purpose is, they think it's just this annoying ticking machine.
Yeah.
But then once they understand its purpose, I always call it like their imaginary drummer, right?
Yeah.
And so any kind of music, even non-classical, needs to have tempo and rhythm. Mm-hmm. So just the foundation of music, this is rhythm and tempo is the foundation of music. I even say as a bassist, right? We play pitches on our instruments, but if you were to take pitch totally out of the equation and you were playing, say, snare drum or something like that, would a rhythm that has no pitch, a rhythm and tempo has no pitches involved, is that music? And the answer is always yes.
Yeah.
So once they get the rhythm and tempo, they're already playing music before they even get to the pitches.
That's right. Yeah, and separation of that left and right hand is, a critical thing. I mean, we do that in book 1 of Essential Elements. It's like we do pizzicato, so we're learning left hand, and then we take the left hand away. We're doing open strings. So that separation is just critical. Because it's so hard to learn two things at one time. And
it's never too early to start with rhythm. I feel that's the thing that especially at these high-level auditions, that's the thing that adjudicators are looking at the most. A lot of times students get so concerned about missed notes. And
so left hand is like, yeah.
They're so hard on themselves about it. And sometimes they just let the tempo and the rhythm get out of hand because they're beating themselves up over one missed note.
Right.
It's like the whole audition is
gone.
a goner. Yes. That's not true. They're looking at the big picture, and they're looking for the general maturity of the musician.
Yeah. I would say recovery is important. There's students like, it's how you recover from a mistake. And, as you grow as a musician, you make fewer mistakes, you make less critical mistakes, but every musician, even the best bass player, violinist, whoever in the world, is making mistakes, but they're just correcting them at the point so quickly that we don't hear them.
I 100% agree.
So and I tell my students, I said, like, when I play with you, I'm making mistakes all the time, but you're not hearing them because I can fix them really quickly. And maybe I'm making fewer than you. Maybe I'm making less large of mistakes than you, but it's the recovery. And so when you talk about or sight reading or when we're in performance, you have to be able to recover and not let your mind get stuck on that one thing, but you got to keep going, right? You're always in the now. What happened 2 notes ago doesn't matter anymore. You're here. And that's the tough part about music. It's transitory. We can't go back and erase our mistakes. We do that during rehearsals, but we can't do that during a performance. So.
Absolutely. I agree. And, that's why I always try to separate 2 things, the intentional practice versus mock audition run-throughs.
Okay.
And so with intentional practice, I encourage students to practice only small segments of the music. Usually it's the most challenging parts for them at that moment. And I would rather them spend the week really analyzing those 2 measures, going note to note, working out the location of the notes in the left hand, putting the rhythm aside. Just find the notes first.
Yep.
Get comfortable with the shifts. Get comfortable with where the notes are located. And then after that, go ahead and try that section. You're either playing it at a slower tempo and in rhythm, but you doing smaller sections allows them to have deeper focus on it. And then it allows them to, do frequent repeats, but they don't have to go all the way back to measure 1 each time.
Yeah.
Or to the, 7 measures back. Instead, they're going just back to the beginning of the measure. So it really keeps the learning very focused by putting either mental or even physical brackets around sections that are more challenging. But then after that, I like them towards when it gets closer to the audition, I like them to do mock auditions. And so what it's like is them just playing through the repertoire from beginning to end and seeing, like, do they, just like you said, Dr. Laux, it's about how do they recover from moments where maybe it derails a little bit.
Well, and then they know where they need to go back and refocus. Once they do that, that's probably the whole point, right? It's like, okay, I know I have this, I can do this every single time, but when I get here, that's where the problems might be, and I need to go back and figure out what the issue is. Is it rhythm? Is it shifting? Is it whatever? I mean, it could be a lot of things, I guess.
Exactly. And this is great for students. Oftentimes they talk about music as being this solely right brain activity, but oftentimes what I find with this kind of like high level bass coaching, right, is that with students who are also that tend to gravitate towards the left side of the brain, like if they're more mathematically inclined, more science inclined on that side of things, they also succeed with this too, because of the fact that music brings to the table the need to be analytical about your work, the need to it really emphasizes precision. It emphasizes experimentation. Sometimes you have to sense the little things you need to change, in your left and right hand. And oftentimes I do observe, I watch a student as they're trying to, figure out, let's say, where to place their, which part of the finger to use when they're holding down a pitch in the on the fingerboard side. But and then of course, if I see inefficiencies, I will step in and try to guide them, of course, using some of my experience. But yes, there is definitely, I encourage them to be very analytical in their approach to learning the instrument.
Yeah, that's only going to make them better. And like we said earlier, just make them into their own teacher, because someday you're not going to be there for them. They need to be able to do it themselves. And so they need these skills, especially that, if they're going into performance, it can be pretty lonely. You and your instrument a lot, but you need to have those skills to keep going, keep moving forward.
Absolutely.
What are some of the things that, this is, we have a lot of orchestra teachers listening. So, and I would say there's a whole bunch of bass players out there, but a lot of us aren't professional bass players. And so, and I would say out of all the instruments, it's the most different. So what are some of the things that you see if you've ever, visit a classroom, or just if you're working with just some new students, some things that you see and maybe some solutions that have worked for you to correct them?
Yeah, so I actually have experience of doing clinics in the public schools. I've often worked with various community programs, also K through 12 programs as well. And I've stepped in, I've run rehearsals, conducted sectionals.
Awesome.
And there's one of the first things that comes to mind when I think of low string players is that occasionally when they're working with a teacher that plays violin or viola, sometimes they get taught a grip that's very forward-handed, meaning that the pinky is on top of the stick. And we have to be careful about that because, especially for bass players, when the pinky goes above the stick, it becomes too much of a forward-handed grip.
We call that like a pronation, right? Pronated grip.
It gets a bit too pronated, and then it actually has the reverse effect. It takes away weight into the string, and the thicker strings of these lower string instruments, they need more weight. Yeah. So what that often means is that we just have to switch the grip to be a bit more backhanded. So the pinky kind of grabs a little bit underneath the stick.
Okay.
Being on top. The other thing,
and you're focusing then just on like complete weight. Sorry, I hit my microphone. Complete weight of the arm onto the string, rather than trying to, I guess, twist or pronate, like we said.
Yes. Yeah. So by pronating towards the, some pronation's okay, but if the pinky is on top of the stick, that already is removing some of the weight that could be put into, it can get more power out of the instrument. And like our issue is that oftentimes we don't get enough sound out of the low strings. And that's a big issue for K through 12 programs sometimes that don't always have a full section of bassists. You may have one or two bassists.
Right.
You're trying to maximize that, just a couple of players, if not one player, hold that bass part. So I would recommend, just pay attention to some of your lower string players, whether they're a cello or bassists, and make sure that their pinky is not on top of the stick. Try to make sure that it's going underneath it. Another thing too is when they're holding the bass, I've seen where, it's great that they are learning to stand with it. I know generally in the professional setting, we tend to sit with the bass.
I always teach sitting. I think it helps stabilize it a little bit more. And I have a few students who prefer to stand, but there's always a stool there. But I just prefer the sitting option. Honestly, that's just me.
Same here, and that's why also. I'm just trying to think. With my own playing, I think the reason why I prefer sitting is just so that I don't have to hold the instrument up or anything. I don't have to support it. I don't have to balance.
You can take your hands away and the instrument doesn't move.
Exactly.
Right. And in your standing, there are ways that people do it, but I still think it's not quite the same.
Yeah. And so even like in young students, right, especially for those who are that do stand with the bass, sometimes they really squeeze the fingerboard. Yeah. And I noticed part of it is that they think that they're holding the instrument totally upright when standing. But actually, it's leaning back ever so slightly because the scroll is so top heavy.
Right.
So I always tell my standing students to lean the bass a little bit forward. It's a bit awkward at first, and it looks a little strange, but to start by leaning the bass a little bit more in the forward direction. So what happens is the bass actually kind of leans into the curved fingers.
Okay.
Instead of you having to press down the string, it teaches you how to not squeeze with the thumb so much in the back. I even tell them, okay, can you do the fingerings here, but without using can you take your thumb away from the back?
Wow.
And so if they're still finding it difficult to shift around the instrument without the thumb being there, then it could be that they just, the bass needs to be a bit more upright. They're still leaning it on their thumb. Yeah. It's leaning back a bit too much.
Kind of using it's almost like using gravity to help you.
Yes.
Yeah. And I see that more on the cello where you can really like let the arm weight come down. But in the bass, it's so much more vertical than the cello. We don't have as much lean. That's another reason I kind of like the sitting part, because it does give the bass an opportunity to come back a little bit more and allow gravity to help a little bit.
Yes. And then that gets to the other aspect.
And I'll also say this, in the comments, we're going to have 800 comments from the bass players of why standing is better. And we can get into German and French too, but there'll be fights. About that.
Yes.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, as far as the whole teaching standing versus sitting aspect, yes, sitting absolutely has its advantages. I feel like when I play sitting, that it's easier to play forte, easier to play louder. When standing, I find it's easier to play softer. Because when the way that gravity is working with your right hand, standing sometimes with the bass being so upright like that, it allows the arm to hang. So without having to lift your arm up, you're able to control the weight a little bit more. Yeah. And for piano dynamics. So it's just an observation of standing versus sitting.
I never really thought about that, but that's really cool. Really interesting.
You had a question, I think, on German or French.
Yeah, let's do we want to get into that? No.
Yeah, sure, why not? This is dangerous territory, so I better be careful with this one.
So what's your preference? What do you play?
So for students, I always, again, believe in whatever comes natural to them. Okay. So I don't push them towards either of the types of bow grips, but I personally play French in the orchestra. I play both, but I choose to play French because that's what I personally feel is more comfortable for my hand type and. Do you think there's a body type or anything like that has to go along with it, or is it just 100% preference? No, I think that it's 100% preference. Okay. I will say I cannot tell right away from looking at someone's hand whether they're going to be a German bow or player. But what I will say
there's a joke in there somewhere, but no.
What I will say is that for French bow, I definitely find that string crossings are significantly easier on French bow, at least initially. The learning curve is not as steep for string crossings, and string crossings are a huge part of string playing, and it's one of the more difficult things about playing low strings.
I would agree.
But for German, where I find that the benefits of German bow are first of all, the grip is a lot easier to describe to the younger students.
Yeah. I always find though that they like Neanderthal and they grip it really hard and it doesn't need to be that way.
Yes.
You know, kind of tell them like when you hold German bow, you need to pretend like there's this little fuzzy animal in your hand. You're not going to squeeze it.
That's great. I love that idea. I'm going to try that out myself.
There you go.
Yeah. And then,
who would have thought that a violin player had this bass knowledge? But no, go ahead. I'm sorry. This is so great.
But yeah, for German bow, once they're at the intermediate advanced level, they'll notice that, especially if they've had experience playing with both grips, that German bow tends to execute off the string bowings a little bit more easily. So your spiccatos might gel a little bit sooner than for French bow. That's been my observation. So
I've heard that.
Yeah. So off the string bowings come easier for German in general. And the string crossings come a bit more easily to French bow players initially.
Cool. That's awesome. And then and so you said that regardless of what the student comes in with, as long as it feels good to them, you're not trying to convert them one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, if they're starting completely fresh, the easiest one, I feel like, at least in my case, the most convenient one is to start them with French.
Yeah.
Only because of it's just from a matter of practicality. I think that both grips can create equally amazing musicians. Yep. But out of practicality, I'm a French bow player, professionally I am. And so, you know, it's something that I'm extremely familiar with. And there may be times where I find that it's easier to describe it to like some more nuanced things with that particular grip, at least related to the bow grip itself. Musicality, it all ends up being the same. Those concept things like the tempo, intonation, the what is it, like pitch accuracy, all those things. It's universal for both grips. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is that a lot of the students' rental instruments, they come with a French bow included.
Oh, okay.
So I'm like, okay, you know,
it's already there. Yeah. And as a teacher, you know, when I was teaching beginning strings, you know, for me, it was a lot, the similarities to the cello. So it's like one less different thing because there's already 4 different instruments. So, you know, one less different thing to have to teach. And so that's kind of what I went with. And I would say most of my students now play French. But depending on where I've been and what school I'm in and who the feeder teacher is, you know, for high school, my last school, it was pretty much all German players because that's what he played. And he was a bass player. So, but yeah, it's I guess one less different thing. So tell us a little bit about your service. Like before we started recording, you said you do a lot of in person, but you also do some online and you do some hybrid. Tell us about your service and kind of how you got started with that.
Yes. So what I do is something called the most popular thing that I do is the Audition, the double bass Audition Accelerator. And essentially what this is many of the parents that reach out to me, at least before even the Audition Accelerator came out, a lot of parents that were reaching out to me would specifically reach out saying in their emails, like, my son or daughter, or, you know, my child wants to audition for such and such festival, regional festival, district, all-state. Right. They're auditioning for this summer camp. And sometimes it is Interlochen or Tanglewood or one of those places. Sometimes it's something I'm a little bit less familiar with. and can you help my child get there?
Get them into this orchestra or this festival.
Yes,
right.
Okay. So it was always a goal oriented email to begin with. And so I always approached it from this mindset of, yes, I can help with that. And they would usually take lessons with me over the course of a 12-week period. And because for a lot of the students who were coming in, that's about 3 months was how much time we needed to solidify all the repertoire requirements and scale requirements for said auditions. And from there they would take the audition. I'm fortunate that the vast majority of them have had success with this.
That's
and
great.
then
it's a reflection on you. So congratulations on that. You've had some students get into some big places.
Yeah, my most recent one actually was I have a student who got into Northeastern. I'm sorry, he's at Northeastern. That's Boston. Northwestern Bienen school. So he ended up going there, and he was studying with some of the bassists from the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and that's I was very proud of that student.
For sure.
Certainly realizing that I was able to get that student, to the level of Northwestern.
It's a great school. Yeah.
Yeah. And it wasn't like that particular student came to me already at Northwestern level.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing that parents should know, is that even though your child isn't necessarily playing at that level at this moment, that whole trajectory can change with the right systems in place.
I love that. Yeah. So, I mean, it's about, like we said earlier, just being organized and having a plan and sticking to it and having routines and being, mindful and, towards all that you're doing with the instrument.
And then also another thing that made me so focused on audition coaching specifically, as opposed to just general double bass lessons. What got me very specific about this is just the speed in which students were learning under me. So I had one student from California. They were auditioning they had aspirations to audition for CODA and then also for CASMEC, which is like their equivalent of All-States there.
Okay.
And he came to me with maybe only 1.5 years experience playing the bass. And the idea of making statewide festivals in California can almost sound like a pipe dream to a lot of people. But, he had the passion and he had the motivation. But the question is just how do we get started? Coming to me for our first initial lesson, my mind is going, how do we get this process started? And what does he need right now to be focusing on? And what is the difference between where he is now and what the expectation is for CASMEC, CODA, all those kinds of audition requirements. So, lesson by lesson, we would focus on, one aspect of the audition. I would give him the feedback during the lesson. At the end of the lessons, all the students get typed notes that I email to them.
Nice.
For my younger students, right? Usually the way I work that out is just because they're school age, I will email the parent,
Sure.
But then of course address the notes to the kid.
Cool.
And from there, students also at any time they can record themselves, either an audio or video. Anytime they want, they can send me recordings in between lessons, and I'm always happy to give feedback in between, so that way they're not lost in the middle of the week.
Wow. That's a great, I mean, that's a huge thing, because I think a lot of kids would benefit from that. And that's part of the accelerator process, it sounds like.
Some students really like that kind of mentorship.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's they have a feeling of that someone is very invested in what they're looking to achieve. So
Yes.
By making myself available and kind of like an open door, like, yes, you do have your once a week 1 hour lessons for these 12 weeks, but in between that, here is everything else that you can be taking advantage of, and the resources that are at your disposal. And I do set certain boundaries, like the responses may take like 24, 48 hours.
Well, sure.
I'm a busy musician.
You have to.
do a lot of sub work,
Yeah.
for like Boston area union orchestras. And but I always make sure that they get a very high level response. The reason why sometimes I don't respond back right away is I'm trying to give them feedback that will that's thoughtful and will genuinely help them, put them in the right direction.
It needs to be meaningful, and sometimes you take the time to. It sounds like you're taking the time to really process and give them meaningful feedback, which is going to make that experience so much better for them. Yeah.
And also I'm constantly scanning my email for things that may be too vague for them. I always try to catch myself for sections where I'm like, you have to, any of those moments that resonate as you have to practice more.
We avoid that. Yeah.
How do I make this specific? Even for my own brain, I know one of the things that got me into this whole obsession with audition coaching and learning high-level music to begin with is that I wish I could say that I was as good of a student as many of the kids that I work with. Many of them are coming to me. Some of them are straight A students. Some of them are Ivy bound.
Yeah.
Really, accomplished.
Sharp kids. Yeah.
Very, very, very sharp kids. And their families know it, and they know which direction that they're heading in. But for me, right, as someone who may have struggled a little bit more in my high school days, music really helped me to get structured and disciplined about how I learn. And it created the system of learning that later carried over to getting better in college.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, you can apply a lot of what we do in music. We can definitely apply to all sorts of disciplines. And I tell my students that, I mean, we want you in this orchestra program for your 4 years because you develop as a musician, but you're also developing skills that you can't really get in other classes, but the skills that you get, will apply to whatever you decide to do in life. And I've had students come back and tell me, like, orchestra helped me get this job or do in a totally unrelated profession. It makes a difference. So
yes, and like music study most definitely has its place in learning, especially when it comes to executive functioning skills. And like, this is like a term that's becoming more and more well known now. Everyone's talking about it now. You go to any like college if you listen to any college podcasts now, those that are talking about success with pre-college materials and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the whole application process.
They're constantly emphasizing that students develop in those areas, and music is such an avenue for doing that. There's the aspect of task initiate. How do you get started on something that you don't initially know how to do right away?
Mm-hmm.
How do you problem solve that? How do you sense the things that you need to change and almost verbalize it to yourself? So being able to be this like self-directed learner is becoming so important to some of the top universities out there.
Well, they're not teaching that in math and English and science. They're teaching the subject matter, but we have the subject matter, but we have to have this process to be able to function within that subject matter and be successful.
Yes, not to mention that what's unique about playing in an orchestra, as opposed to even being, I should say, even solo players have to do this too, because they have to listen to the accompaniment, they have to listen to the pianist or the orchestra. So all musicians, to some extent, they, especially when you're playing with ensembles, it's a very interpersonal.
Yes.
Kind of type of learning. You're always listening around you. You're figuring out how your part interacts with other people. And you're constantly analyzing those things. You're thinking how oftentimes one thing I teach my students is that sometimes they see rests on a page, or they see long rests, 64 measures.
Bass players tend to get long rests sometimes.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Mahler 2 or something.
Yeah.
Some of the hour-long orchestra pieces where basses are, or certain instruments are basically counting rests for, it feels like eternity. But I always said, instead of counting at a certain point, if you know if you start to learn the music, right, and you're listening around you, there may be a certain point where you don't necessarily have to keep counting all of those rests, those measured rests that are coming up in between. Instead, you might just, you can listen in. Okay, the clarinet comes in on beat 1, and then 2 beats later, I have a pickup that I have to come in on.
Yeah, starting to think in the bigger picture of music and not just. This is why in my classroom I always have my full score up on the screen behind me, because it's my iPad and I do them digitally, so the kids can see, here's what everybody else is doing, here's what I'm doing, here's where I fit in. They need that context. And so it's visual, but they also use their ears and they're listening for that context too. So,
not to mention, they're also constantly shifting their attention. It really trains them how to go from, and at a very expeditious way. Music trains them to go from looking at the conductor to looking at the music to listening to the xylophone and trying to imitate the rhythm, of the xylophone, and then, and then figuring out, okay, this instrument enters here, then I come in here.
Yeah.
So being able to shift your attention and focus from one place to another, all within a certain amount of time. Being able to be that adaptive like that is such a critical skill for these young kids.
It really is. It really is. And like I said, it carries with them, even if they don't go on to become professional musicians. Whatever they do in life, they're going to use the skills that they're getting from learning music.
Absolutely.
It's just awesome. It's just awesome. That's what's so powerful about what we get to do. So the other thing that you had mentioned was that sometimes you're coaching on socio-emotional learning. Can you tell us a little bit about what your experience with that?
Yes. So, a lot of, I have worked for organizations like Boston Music Project and other El Sistema inspired programs. And a lot of those programs oftentimes emphasize this. And sometimes within the context of, working within those programs, sometimes it can feel initially very abstract concept. Like, what is SEL? What is social emotional learning? And what is how does this apply to students tangibly? And so one thing that got me thinking about that is just even some students, at least that I've worked with in the past, have occasionally either like they have some neurodivergence, so either they have like ADHD or they have certain levels of autism, but they're super functional,
right?
And so oftentimes you may not even know that about them from initially meeting them, But then through working with them a little bit further, even though I'm not a clinician, I cannot personally diagnose a student. But sometimes I get a little bit of a sense that a student may need help with, like I said earlier, with executive functioning.
Yeah.
And so what that means is that sometimes I cannot say to some students, just figure it out. I can't be like that, right?
No.
There are students who will feel very overwhelmed.
Yeah.
They'll start to check out right away. And, they may not want to continue with this. They might feel that this is, outside their realm. And I want to say that with the right support, that students can absolutely succeed in this. And I see it all the time. Oftentimes, these particular students are some of the most focused people on when it's something that they're interested in.
Right.
So the more that you expose them, to the more that you focus the learning, not just as being something performative, like you need to make it into this festival or you need to make it here. That's a good goal, right?
Right.
But when you're putting so much emphasis on that without cultivating the interest in it through, like what I oftentimes say to myself, what makes a whole musician? And that means, being able to, listen to, sometimes I will send students, recordings, or I'll listen to it with the student. And it's not like I just spend an hour listening to music. We're listening to, let's say, a 30-second portion. I stop the music and I'll be like, did you hear the oboe solo here and how they connected the notes in this way? Did you hear how the strings, when they do this, this is called legato, when they do this. And I sometimes it's so you just, even if they're not necessarily playing the instrument in front of me, increasing their knowledge of the things that are outside of just playing the instrument. Right. So they become they start to not just become a good player, but they become a mature musician.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. They start to have expertise in it, and a lot of students thrive on that kind of learning.
Yeah, they do. And just like making them a little bit more worldly about,
yes.
Like the holistic part of music rather than just, I play bass, that's all I do, The
other thing is I like to emphasize, I like to do sometimes like mind mapping. Like, so what I do is I say, if you do this, then this happens, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm very specific. Like, if you do the shift in this way, you are less prone to injury.
Yeah.
If say you practice this particular exercise at the tip as well as at the frog, if you practice now at the tip, it actually makes playing at the frog easier. And I have them demonstrate it in front of me, so that I'm certain that they understand it before they apply it at home.
That's awesome. That is really awesome.
They can do it in front of me. So that just in case I need to step in and start adjusting things, I want them to be confident that they can do it before they start doing repetitions of it. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, this has been just such a great conversation, and I love the service that you have and the ideas and how you're bringing that from how you learned now to others. And so how can people reach out to you if they're interested in bass coaching?
So the best way to reach out is first go to my website, darrensacksbasscoach.com.
Okay, we'll put that link in the description. So
when you go to the website, on the homepage, you can sign up for the PDF that I have. So that outlines a couple of basic things about taking auditions, high-level auditions. the more important thing is if you go to the Work With Me section, you can book a free consultation with me. So initially, you're just providing me with your contact information for me to be in touch with you, and then we can schedule a time that will work best for your kid, and we'll get to hear how they play and go from there.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come out, and I know that this has been just a great for people to listen to and learn from, and maybe be able, even though they might not be teaching bass, to take back to their classrooms and use some of these ideas and just that thought process, just trying to refine that and bring that to their classroom. So I really appreciate you being here, Darren.
Thank you so much, Dr. Laux.
Yes, absolutely. Well, everyone, for wrapping up episode 119, thanks for listening, and we will see you all next time on the Orchestra Teacher Podcast. Bye, everybody. Thank you for listening. You can support the work I do by hitting that like button and subscribing to the Orchestra Teacher Podcast YouTube channel and visiting www.orchestrateacher.net.